I'm Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud, presented to you by SaltWire. Thank you very much for spending some time with me as we look beyond the headlines. And there's been a lot of talk about policing in Canada for the last number of years. We just saw the final report released from the Mass Casualty Commission about the events that took place in 2020. In fact, a number of those recommendations had a timeline. The province of Nova Scotia has to meet within a few days, to be honest. But I wanted to talk about something else that came about as, the Halifax Regional Municipality wanted to look into its policing model. And it was a motion that was made back about 2 years ago by a councillor to look at what's in place now. And it might surprise many that what is there is not an integrated force. The story at saltwire.com, if you're interested in following up on the latest there, change to policing HRM needed fast, according to councillors. And there is a concern that, some of the players here, the federal government, the RCMP, might not be on board for big changes. And this does say a lot. What's clear is policing has to change, but it's less clear if the Halifax Regional Police and the RCMP are going to be on board for this transformation. Let's talk a little bit about this with the councillor who first brought this motion to the table. He is the representative for District 6. That's Harbourview, Burnside, Dartmouth East, and Tony Mancini. It's good to see you again, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Sheldon. Good to see you also.
2 years after you asked for that report, what in that document surprised you, if anything?
Well, maybe if I could just delay that answer for a second. The reason for the request of the report was, I think we owe our residents of HRM, answer the question, do we have the right police service and model to service the residents of HRM? Since amalgamation 27 years ago now, it's a different municipality. It truly is. And does this dual policing model work? When amalgamation happened, we combined in a whole bunch of other communities and villages and towns, a lot of them being rural, which had RCMP, with police force in Dartmouth and Halifax. And that model has been the model that people wanted to protect for a long time, particularly our RCMP. So the question was, is this the right model? So your question was, any surprises? Well, the fact that they stated in the report and in the presentation of the council yesterday that we do not have an integrated model, it's no surprise, but it's a surprise that it was finally mentioned. We as council, and that work closely with policing, knew the model wasn't integrated, but even though it was portrayed that way in a lot of ways.
And to that point, this report that was tabled, says you have two options. Either pick one or make the two of them work together. I say make because that's part of what the mandate of council is to use what tools are available under the provincial government's Justice Act, the Policing Act, and then make it work. Are you confident that can happen within the next 2 years?
Well, there's a lot in this report. There's a lot of good stuff in this report, and there's a lot of things that are really good that you alluded in your introduction. Some of the other reports, the Wortley report, the Mass Casualty report, have been asking for, and a lot of that's confirmed in this report. There's things, though, when it comes to working with the RCMP, and first of all, let me be clear, Sheldon, I have the utmost respect for all of the officers that wear the uniform, RCMP or HRP, and the people that are on the streets or in the cars on a day-to-day basis, the utmost respect. The challenge we have is the way the model works. RCMP do not report to HRM. They do not report to the Board of Police Commissioners. So they have a contract. They do policing as they see fit, and they report to the federal level of RCMP. So there's things in this report that says, RCMP should, like HRP, report to the Board of Police Commission. Yes, the RCMP attend the Board of Police Commission meetings, but they're not obligated to respond to us. So there's governance changes that's being recommended here. So it is a question: will they change? Will the federal government change? Will the RCMP federally change? Locally, the RCMP, they have new leadership, and the chief superintendent has been great and really good to work with, eager to work with us, but he doesn't make the final decision. And so that's the big question. So Councillor Mason added to the motion to come back within 18 months. So here you've got time. Go away, work on this integration that we all would love to see as much as possible. Part of it is let's get a response from the federal government. Let's find out from the provincial government. Let's find out from the senior folks at RCMP. Are they prepared to do what it takes to be fully integrated? I'm hoping that's the case. I doubt it, though, very much.
With this survey, they asked stakeholders. They asked people what they expected. We know that there has been a change in expectation of what people expect of policing in Nova Scotia, in Halifax specifically. But globally, there's this conversation about what we are hoping. The defund the police movement, that was something that you had been involved with in that conversation. And now we have this, we have to make a decision. Policing is getting more expensive. At the same time, people are asking, what do we want from our officers? Did you see that there's a recognition of that within the report, that people know what the clear vision is? It's about leadership.
Yeah, it's about leadership, but it's also, I never liked the term defunding police, but it's reimagining or reallocating or policing of the way it functions. An example that's always used over and over again. If a police officer goes to a call and there's a mental health issue, that police officer takes that person, brings them to the hospital, and has to stay with them until someone sees them. So you're looking at an officer who's making $110,000 a year or more, maybe sitting there for 8 hours, 12 hours. Or, if there's a wellness call, an officer shows up and goes to that wellness call. Well, is that officer trained to deal with those issues, right? Should there not be maybe a healthcare worker going with that officer, making that call? The officer is there to make sure the situation is safe, but the interaction with that individual who's in that mental health crisis, should be led by a professional that's trained to do that. This report talks about that. In fact, I'm just reading here, they're talking about peace officers and civilian responders and community-led positions like navigators and healthcare workers being part of that model. And that's, again, we heard that in the Wortley report, we heard it in the mass casualty report. It's consistent.
I'd like to hear your thoughts when we look back to previous chief, Jean-Michel Blais, who had an RCMP background, and he was put in charge, and there were concerns over the relationship he had being integrated in a municipal service. I think there was some hope that he'd be able to bridge that gap between the two forces. And then with Chief Kinsella coming in again from a municipal background, and even then we have that vote of non-confidence against him. So it sounds like it's not just the chief for the person in that role. So how does a council, what authority, what role do you play in trying to get that in order before trying to put the two together to make one that works?
Yeah, it's really complex. You hit the nail on the head for sure. It is more than just the chief or the chief superintendent. It's the systems, right? How do we integrate these systems? Chief Blais was there, and he had the RCMP background. So, and I wasn't there when he was hired, but that was part of the reason they hired him, because he had that background. Bringing the chief superintendent and the chief of HRP into the same building, trying to integrate certain units using same equipment, so be able to communicate over the radios and such. And it's so much more that it's really the leadership and the willingness to have two police forces do things the exact same way, and there lies the problem. The RCMP do their way, HRP does it their way. How do we get those to be on the same page? That's the big question mark we have. Leadership, governance, policy, there's a whole bunch of things that need to take place. But that willingness, from an HRP perspective, look, we've got our challenges. You alluded to it. I mean, to have the police force, have the majority of the police officers have a non-confidence vote on our chief, which I didn't think was very productive to do that. It was a union move, and I didn't agree with it. But we have challenges. How do you get them on the same page when we have different ways of doing things? They're two different types of police forces. This report talks about some of the challenges we're having policing. Part of it is because of this lack of integration. So getting there would be great and ideal. I keep repeating myself. I don't know how realistic it is to get there.
They operate in silos, as this report points out, and it does hope or at least it provides some guidance, hopefully, that you can bridge that gap and make it work. And in 18 months' time, is the vote to say we can't do this? Is the vote to say we are hopeful, so let's go to the next step? Yep. We've got, obviously, municipal elections next year, so there's that consideration as well.
Yeah, I mean, the ask here, and we haven't finished the conversation, by the way. We ran out of time yesterday, and in the next council meeting, we'll finish the conversation. But the ask here is go away, do as much as we possibly can that's in the report right now, work on that integration. But the big piece is let's get some answers. Let's get some answers from the RCMP and the willingness to work. Let's confirm they're willing to do it. Let's look at the federal government, what they're doing. Let's find out what, policing right now, the provincial government is looking at policing very hard, especially after the mass casualty report. And they're looking at a whole bunch of different things. So we're hoping by 18 months we have more of that information. Then we can get into, okay, where do we go from there? Is it realistic to continue down this path? Or do we look at a different model? Is it realistic to think that we can have one police force cover all of HRM? I challenge that too, because the geography, right? We're the size of Prince Edward Island. A good percentage of it is rural geography. I mean, RCMP are really good. That I think in many ways, from a rural perspective, that's what they've been doing at least. But when I mentioned earlier on amalgamation time, we thought of places like Cole Harbour and Sackville to be more rural. Well, that's not the case now. They're not rural. They're far from it. And so is it a reduced involvement from RCMP? Possibly. So I think at 18 months' time, we're going to have a conversation. Where do we go from that point in time forward?
And
integration, great. I think, I think that is great. If we can go there, I'm all for it. I don't know at this point in time. I really don't. I have some opinions, as I just stated some of them, right. But I'm looking for the evidence, the data, to tell us what direction. I'm hoping in 18 months' time we've made some improvements on policing the way that we're existing now. But then at that point in time, we can have a further conversation. What direction are we going in?
And we have the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations, which is also to look at what the model of provincial policing is. So that in its due course may change what options are on the table. But as recently as just a few months ago, Grand Prairie, Alberta decided, they were going to get rid of the RCMP, move to their own municipal service, $10 million. But that's a much smaller scale than what we're talking about here, isn't it?
It is, and we don't know what the numbers are to go towards either a reduced RCMP involvement or a single unit. We don't know, and I think that'll be a question we'll be asking over the next number of months. In 2009, 2010, I think this is the third review, if not the fourth review of our policing model. But back then, before my time, they did look at a cost analysis at that point in time, what that would be. So it'll be interesting when we ask that question again, what would that look like now? Look, if it's going to be more expensive, but it gives us a better police model, it protects our citizens more, it gives us better coverage, I'm willing to have that conversation. We have to look at what those numbers are for sure. If it improves policing and makes our communities safer. And so again, we don't have that data in front of us. We can't really have that conversation now. Maybe we start that conversation in 18 months based on what comes back.
It would be very easy at this point, though, to say the RCMP had been heavily criticized by the Mass Casualty Commission for its failings and for some long-standing systemic issues about under-policing in communities.
Yep.
What's the danger as a council to say, well, let's just jump in now? I know you say Councillor Mason has already said, let's push this out to 18 months, but you're still yet. There's another conversation to come up in another couple of weeks about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a contract that we have, the province has with the RCMP, and we have. If we were to break that contract, what that looks like. There's a lot of variables. The province, as we both mentioned, I think it's premature. We don't have enough data to make that to have that conversation just yet. I'm eager to have that conversation, and really that was the rationale behind my motion in the first place, and I was a little disappointed that this report didn't include that and that financial analysis, but we're going to go down that path eventually. We'll be asking for that, and my colleagues felt, let's do the work. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Even if we get to the 18 months and we confirm what we feel, many of us feel, that we're not going to be able to do this full integration, we're going to do some good work in 18 months to improve policing in the meantime. And then have it at that point in time. So many variables out there, and we're growing, and we need to make sure policing covers the areas it needs to cover.
It's often said that council has no direct authority over policing. It's the Board of Police Commissioners, but this document also says that is somewhat neutered by the fact that the RCMP don't have to comply. Right. Yeah. So what is the relevance of the Board of Police Commissioners in 2023?
Well, the Board of Police Commissioners do have an overseeing role mandate, and I sat on the Board of Police Commissioners for a number of years, and it does good work, and it's improved from years gone by. And no disrespect to any of my colleagues, those who sat on it, it was really a rubber stamp many, many years ago, and it's really changed over where it should be there to challenging policing. They're set up to be an overseer. I think it's of great value to have them look at this report. They really weren't involved in this report to any extent. They've been, they were involved in the defund or allocate policing report. They were involved in that piece. They should be involved. And I think there's great value in it because they're already engaged in it. And it'll be interesting to see what their opinion is on truly integrating the two forces.
And here we have, again, the end of this conversation. You alluded to it earlier about the men and the women who wear the uniform, regardless of what service they're currently involved with, but yet policing is tough. And community has a high expectation that they do the right thing. Yeah,
policing is tough. It's as tough as it has been, right? We've had the Black Lives Matter situation occur. We've had some horrible stories across this country and particularly in the United States involving policing. I look at my kids, when we sit around the dining room table on Sunday, and my kids are 28 and 24, and their perspective on policing is a whole lot different than mine. And we have some very good discussions and very good debates and respectable debate. And I've learned from them, and I'm hoping they've learned from me on this conversation. It is tough being a cop. When I see a police officer in our municipality, I always introduce myself and I have a conversation. And I ask them, how's it going? Some of them tell me and some of them don't, but it's tough being a cop. It's tough putting a uniform on. It's not the same situation where we have the same high regard for policing. I do, but it is a challenge. And to do that job, we're losing good police officers because it's not the same as when they first signed up. We were losing police officers in the fire department. We're losing police officers who are towards the end of their career but could stick around for another 5-6 years. They're saying, you know what, I'm done. I'm out of here. We've done some good job, particularly at HRP, of recruiting and having more diversity. That's been good. They are well paid and they should be well paid. They're the highest on the list of salaries overall in the municipality. The RCMP have got an increase in their salaries, which is the first time in a long time for them. So there's good elements of that, but it's tough being a cop, right? Not everyone's welcome you. The cup of tea is not being offered to every time these folks show up. But the work they do, and when you call 911, I have all the confidence in the world, they show up. Whether you're in an HRP jurisdiction or whether you're in the RCMP jurisdiction, they show up. That priority one call, they're there. The challenge we're having is those priority two calls and the coverage that we're having, or not enough coverage in a lot of our communities. I think many residents would be surprised that some of our communities have pretty low coverage late at night, and that's part of the battle that we're trying to fight here.
And as we've established, I think expectations have changed. So that does take that, we should take that into account as well. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap this up, Tony?
No, I appreciate the conversation. I think this is good work. This is one of the, from this council, this current council, this is probably one of the most important reports and documents that we're going to have to deal with, because our decisions are going to have a huge ramification in the future as we grow. This city is growing. We're one of the fastest growing municipalities in the country. And there's some challenges with that fast growth. Housing, as we've talked about, the cost of living has gone up. Safety and policing is part of that. So this is important and this is good work. And even though all 17 of us don't necessarily agree 100% when it comes to policing, that's okay. We need to have this conversation, and we need to have it with our citizens too. So I like to see more engagement with our residents. I would like to have, I was a little disappointed that there was a lot of stakeholders involved, but, I would have liked to have seen more involvement with our citizens. I would like to hear the seniors' point of view. I would like to hear the youth point of view and everybody in between on it. So there's lots of work to be done. It's good work. I think that's why you've elected folks like myself to have these conversations. It's not easy work, that's for sure.
And his email is easy enough to find if you want to reach out and share your thoughts with Councillor Mancini. District 6, Harborview, Burnside, Dartmouth East. Tony, I'll call you Tony Mancini, honorary firefighter. I saw the red helmet. They made you a captain the first time you climbed those stairs with the BA on, so good for you. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
So always a pleasure. Thank you very much.